Hi, everybody. This is Denise Tawwab, coming back to talk more about NIST Special Publication 850. And that publication is entitled Building an Information Technology Security Awareness and Training Program. In the first part of this presentation, we talked about just an overview. In this session, we will go into how to design an IT security awareness and training program. So we've already covered an introduction to security awareness and training. We've looked at the components that make that up: awareness, training, and education. And today we'll be talking about designing an awareness and training program. Even a small amount of IT security awareness and training can go a long way toward improving the IT security posture and vigilance within an organization. There are three major steps in the development of awareness and training programs. Designing the program, which includes developing the IT security awareness and training program plan, developing the awareness and training material, and then finally implementing the program. Awareness and training programs must be designed with the organization's mission in mind. The program must support the business needs of the organization, and it must be relevant to the culture and to the IT architecture within the organization. The most successful programs are those that users feel are relevant to the subject matter and to the issues that are presented. Okay, designing a program, the question is, what is our plan? What is our plan for developing and implementing awareness and training opportunities that are compliant with existing directives? In the design step, the awareness and training needs are identified, an effective training plan is developed, organizational buy-in is sought and secured, and your priorities are established. So we're going to talk about how to structure the awareness and training activity, how to and why to conduct a needs assessment, how to develop an awareness and training strategy and plan, how to establish priorities. What do you develop first? Who do you train first? How to set the bar concerning the level of complexity properly, and finally, how to fund the security awareness and training program. So first, let's talk about structuring an awareness and training program. There are three models for structuring your program. Model one is a centralized model where you have centralized policy, strategy, and implementation. Model two, you have centralized policy and strategy, but distributed implementation. And model three, you have centralized policy, but distributed strategy and implementation. So what determines which model you use? Well, the size and geographic dispersion of your organization, the defined organizational roles and responsibilities, as well as your budget allocations and budget authority. In model one, the centralized program management, in this model, responsibility and budget for the entire organization's IT security awareness and training program is given to a central authority. All the directive, strategy, development, planning, and scheduling is coordinated through this security awareness and training authority. Because the awareness and training strategy is developed centrally, then the needs assessment is also conducted by the central authority. The central authority develops the training plan, the awareness and training material, decides on the methods of implementing the material throughout the organization. And typically in such an organization, both the CIO and the IT security program managers are located within this central authority. So it's a very centralized approach. Communication flows in this model this way. Communication between the central authority and the business units travels in both directions. The central authority communicates the agency's policy directives regarding IT security awareness and training, communicates the strategy for conducting the program, and the material and methods of implementing this training to the business units. The business units provide information requested by the central authority. For example, the central authority might collect data on the number of people who attend awareness sessions, the number of people trained on a particular topic, and or the number of people who have yet to attend any training. And then the organizational units can also provide feedback to the central authority on the effectiveness of the training material, on the appropriateness of the methods used to implement the material. And this feedback allows the central authority to fine-tune, add or delete material, or modify the implementation methods. Some characteristics of agencies that deploy Model 1, your centralized model, those agencies tend to be relatively small or highly structured, and you have central management of most IT functions. The headquarters level has the necessary resources, expertise, and knowledge of the mission and operations at the business unit level, or there's a high degree of similarity in mission and operational objectives across all of its units. Next up is Model 2, and this is your partially decentralized program management model. This is where you have a centralized policy and strategy, but distributed implementation. Security awareness and training policy and strategy are defined by the central authority, but the implementation is delegated to your line management officials in the organization. So the training budget, allocation, material development, and scheduling are the responsibilities of line management officials. Needs assessments are conducted by the central authority because they still determine the strategy for the awareness and training program. Policy, strategy, and budget are passed from the central authority to the business units. Based on the strategy, then, the business units develop their own training plans. So each business unit has its own training plan. And then the organizational units develop their awareness and training material and determine the methods of deploying the material within their own units. So all they get from the central authority is policy and strategy. But then they have to come back and create the material and schedule the training for their people. Model 3 is fully decentralized. The types of agencies using Model 3 tend to be relatively large, have a very decentralized structure with general responsibilities assigned to the headquarters and specific responsibilities assigned to unit levels. Have functions that are spread over a wide geographical area, or have semi-autonomous organizational units with separate and distinct missions, so that the training might need to differ greatly between business units. I feel like I skipped a slide. Nope, I did not. All right, next up, conducting a needs assessment. Once you've decided on the model that you're going to use to design and deliver your training, the approach to conducting a needs assessment has to be defined consistent with the organizational model that you chose. So a needs assessment is the process that's used to determine the organization's awareness and training needs. The results provide justification to convince management to allocate adequate resources to meet those training needs. For the needs assessment process, you do want to keep it simple. The process should be only as complicated as is needed to identify the organization's awareness and training program needs. And the tools that you use to identify those needs should take into consideration the organization's culture and conventions, the size, the workforce complexity, and the similarity or diversity of your missions. Understanding overarching organization-specific issues. Does that not sound like federal government speak? That's straight out of NIST Special Publication 850. Let me say that again. Understanding overarching organization-specific issues. The following agency-specific issues must be understood at the start of the needs assessment. You want to know about directives, mission, define roles and responsibilities, any oversight recommendations and observations, and user feedback. When you analyze this information, it should provide answers to 5 key questions. The 5 Key questions answered by a training needs assessment are as follows. One, what awareness, training, and or education are needed? What is required? Two, what is currently being done to meet those needs? Three, what is the current status regarding how these needs are being addressed? Um, Meaning how well are our current efforts working? Four, where are the gaps between the needs and what is now being done? And five, which needs are the most critical? Five key questions for your needs assessment to answer. Out of your needs assessment comes your awareness and training program plan. And again, you're looking at the mission, directives, roles and responsibilities, oversight recommendations and observations, and user feedback that goes into your needs assessment and gives rise to your awareness and training program plan. So, requirements for security and awareness training program. Another important part of the needs assessment is the related IT security awareness and training program requirements. For example, if the awareness and training material is going to be presented using computer based training, a technical assessment should be conducted on the organization's processing platform to make sure that the existing environment will support the new or expanded awareness and training program. Nothing worse than trying to roll out training and then finding out that your platform is inadequate or needs to be tweaked in some way. Example two, if the organization plans to provide classroom training, then the needs assessment has to identify if adequate space exists for an effective learning environment. There also may be human resources issues, including employees with disabilities and special needs. And in some environments, labor union issues may also come up. When you're conducting the needs assessment, you have key personnel involved, executive management, security personnel, system owners, system administrators, and IT support personnel, and then your operational managers and end users. When you're conducting the needs assessment with respect to executive management, these people must fully understand the laws that form the basis for the security program and their leadership roles in ensuring full compliance by users within their units. So they have to understand the laws and basically what is needed to ensure full compliance with the laws. Your security personnel, this is going to be your security program managers and your security officers. They're going to act as expert consultants for their organization, and they have to be well educated on security policy and accepted best practices. Your system owners need a broad understanding of security policy, as well as a high degree of understanding of your security controls and the requirements around the systems that they manage. System administrators and IT support personnel, when you're doing the needs assessment, they're going to need a high degree of authority over your critical security program support operations. And they also need a higher degree of technical knowledge in effective security practices and implementation. So these are your most technical personnel. Then you have operational managers and system users. These folk need a higher degree of security awareness and training on security controls and on the rules of behavior for the systems that they use in the course of the business day. So, 11 techniques exist for gathering information when you're doing a needs assessment. You can use interviews with all the key groups and the organizations. You can do surveys. Three, you can do review and assessment of the available resource materials. For example, any current awareness and training material, any training schedules, and list of attendees. You can look at all of the resource material around training as it currently exists. Four, you can look at the metrics related to awareness and training. For example, the percent of users who completed a required awareness session or exposure. That's the percentage of users with significant security responsibilities who have been trained in role-specific material. Five, you can review system security plans for general support systems and for major applications to identify system and application owners and appointed security representatives. In that way, you're getting the lay of the security land. Six, you can do a review of system inventory and application user ID databases to determine who has access. Seven, you can look at any findings and or recommendations from oversight bodies or program reviews regarding the IT security program. That could include congressional inquiries, inspector generals, internal reviews and audits, and internal controls program. Eight, conversations and interviews with management, owners of general support systems and major applications, and other IT staff whose business functions rely on IT. Nine, and we're talking about techniques for getting information for a needs assessment. You can look at events that might indicate the need for training or for additional training of specific groups of people. For example, if you experience a denial of service attack, a website defacement, hijacking of your systems, any kind of attack might indicate that there is a need for training. 10, you can review when the technical or infrastructure changes are made. So anytime there's a change in technology or infrastructure, that could be a good indication that some more training is required. 11, the study of trends that have been identified across your industry, within academia or within government publications, or by training organizations. So these are your early warning systems. When you begin to hear about what's happening in your ecosystem, you can start to plan for some training needs to come out of that. Okay, the role of metrics. Metrics are important, and they can be used to help determine your organization's IT security awareness and training needs. Metrics monitor the accomplishment of the awareness and training program goals and objectives by quantifying the level of implementation and the effectiveness of the awareness and training. It analyzes the adequacy of your training efforts and identifies possible improvements. That's what your metrics will do for your organization. You can take a look at NIST Special Publication 855, which is a publication on security metrics, because we're not going to go very deeply into metrics here, but there is a publication for that, and I will probably do a video on metrics at a later date. So what we have on the screen now is a sample awareness and training metric. The components of a training metric include your critical element, your subordinate question, the metric itself, the purpose, the implementation evidence, the frequency of measuring, taking that metric, the formula for calculating the metric, the data source, and any indicators. In this sample, the critical element is have employees received adequate training to fulfill their security responsibilities? That is the question that this particular metric is designed to answer. Have employees received adequate training to fulfill their security responsibilities? The subordinate question is, are employee training and professional development documented and monitored? The metric is the percentage of employees with significant security responsibilities who have received specialized training. The purpose of the metric is to gauge the level of expertise among designated security roles and security responsibilities for specific systems within the organization. We're going to skip the implementation evidence for a minute. The frequency is once a year at a minimum. The formula for this particular metric is the number of employees with significant security responsibilities who have received training divided by the number of employees with significant security responsibilities. The data source for this information is going to be your employee training records or database and or course completion certificates. Indicators. The target for this measure is 100%. If security personnel are not given appropriate training, an organization may not be equipped to combat the latest threats and vulnerabilities. Specific security control options and tools are rapidly changing and evolving. Continued training enforces the availability of necessary security information. This metric can be correlated with the number of security incidents and the number of patched vulnerabilities to determine whether an increase in the number of trained security staff is related to and facilitates a reduction in certain types of incidents and open vulnerabilities. So again, I'm just talking about a sample metric. For each metric, you have implementation evidence. What does success look like? And these are the questions that you would answer. Are significant security responsibilities defined with qualifications, criteria, and documented? Yes or no? Second question, are records kept of which employees have specialized security responsibilities? Yes or no? Third, how many employees in your agency have significant security responsibilities? Four, are training records maintained? Yes or no? Training records indicate the training that specific employees have received. Five, do training plans state that specialized training is necessary? Yes or no? Six, how many of those with significant security responsibilities have received the required training stated in their training plan? Seven, if all personnel have not received training, state all the reasons that apply. And you're given the choice between insufficient funding, insufficient time, courses unavailable, the employee has not registered, or other, where you get to specify. Excuse me. So that's how a training metric would be set up. Excuse me. This is my first video of the day and I'm struggling. I apologize. I'm going to have to edit this part out. All right, the needs assessment output is your training strategy and plan. Once the needs assessment is complete, the information necessary to develop your training plan is available. So let's talk about developing a training strategy and plan. I am going to have to pause this for the moment. Except I don't know how to pause this for the moment. So let me keep going. Developing a training strategy and plan. What is an awareness and training strategy and plan? The strategy and plan is a working document that contains the elements that make up the strategy. It's developed using the information that you gathered during your needs assessment. The elements of your strategy and plan include existing national and local policy that requires the awareness and training to be accomplished. In this case, this is going to be FSMA, OMB's publication A130. Another element is the scope of the awareness and training program. Then you have the roles and responsibilities of the agency personnel who should design, develop, implement, and maintain the training material, and who should ensure that the appropriate users attend or look at the applicable material. You want to include in your strategy and plan the goals to be accomplished for each aspect of the program, your target audience for each aspect of the program, mandatory and, if applicable, optional courses or material for each target audience. So for each targeted audience, you want to identify the mandatory training and any optional training. You want to look at the learning objectives for each aspect of the program that should be included in your training strategy and plan. You want to include the topics to be covered in each session or course. You want to include deployment methods to be used for each aspect of the program. You want to include documentation, feedback, and evidence of learning for each part of the program. And this element of the awareness and training plan should document how the organization will track who has been trained and who still requires training, how your attendees can provide comments on the appropriateness of the material, so that's your feedback mechanism, and how to determine if the attendee benefits from exposure to the awareness or training material. All of those elements need to be included in your awareness and training strategy and plan. You also need to include an evaluation and update of material for each aspect of the program, the frequency that each target audience should be exposed to the material. At a minimum, your entire workforce should be exposed to awareness training annually. A continuous awareness program using different kinds of methods of delivery throughout the year can be very effective. And security training for groups of users with significant security responsibility should be a part of ongoing functional training as needed. Now, how do you establish priorities and set the bar and ultimately achieve funding for the program? So, to establish priorities, once you have your strategy and plan completed, an implementation schedule must be established. If the implementation needs to occur in phases, for example, because of budget constraints or resource availability, then you decide on the factors that you're going to use to prioritize training. Availability of material and resources, role in organizational impact, the state of current compliance, and any critical project dependencies. So that's how you're going to prioritize. What material do we have? What material and resources do we have? Um, what's the organizational impact of training different roles? What's the state of our current compliance? I mean, if you're completely out of compliance in some area, then you want to fix that to the extent that training can. And of course, if you have critical project dependencies coming up and you've got people who need some specific training on some specific technology, then you want to prioritize that. That's what I just covered. Establishing priorities, role and organizational impact. Let me say more about that. It is very common to address priority in terms of organizational role and risk. Broad-based awareness initiatives that address the enterprise-wide mandate may receive high priority because the rules of good security practices can be delivered to the entire workforce quickly. You want to look at high trust, high impact positions and ensure that they receive high priority in the rollout strategy. These types of positions are typically commensurate with the type of access and to what system these users possess. High trust, high impact positions include IT security program managers, security officers, system administrators, and security administrators who hold critical positions. You want to look at the state of current compliance. Look at any major gaps in the program and target deficient areas for early rollout. And again, for critical project dependencies, if there are projects that are depending on a segment of security training in order to meet requirements for the systems involved, then you want to go ahead and schedule the training to ensure that the training occurs within the stipulated timeframes needed to address those dependencies. Now, setting the bar, and this is where we decide on the level of complexity of the material that's going to be developed. The complexity of material must be determined before development begins and applies to all three types of learning. And if you remember from the first module, the types of learning are awareness, training, and education. Complexity must be commensurate with the role of the person who will undergo the learning effort. Materials should be developed based on two important criteria. One, the target attendee's position within the organization, and two, the knowledge of the security skills required for that position. For an awareness effort, focus on the expected rules of behavior for using systems. Rules should come directly from agency policy, apply to everyone in the organization, and rules should be expanded clearly enough that there is no margin for confusion or misunderstanding. As the awareness program matures and most users have been exposed to the initial material, the bar can be raised. Raising the bar can include such things as developing a security basics and literacy course. And this actually is going to be chapter 3 of special publication 816. Okay, setting the bar for a training effort. Because the goal of training is to produce relevant and needed skills and competencies. Okay, I'm sorry, I had to pause for a minute. Because the goal of training is to produce relevant and needed skills and competencies, it's critical that the needs assessment identify individuals with significant IT security responsibilities, assess their functions, and identify their training needs. The training material should provide the skill sets needed for the attendees to accomplish the security responsibilities that are part of their job. Training material can be developed at a beginning level for a person who's just learning a discipline. For example, a system administrator, web or email server administrator, or an auditor. Intermediate material can be developed for somebody who has more experience in a discipline. And of course, advanced material can be developed for those centers of excellence or agency subject matter experts whose jobs incorporate the highest level of trust and an accompanying high level of IT security responsibilities. So, setting the bar for an education effort. This is the most difficult because the curricula are developed by colleges and universities and is impacted less in the short term by agency specific needs. A school that provides the needed learning can be found. An agency can shop for a local college or university whose certificate or degree program meets its needs, or for a school that offers such a program through distant learning, and select the college or university because its curriculum meets the security needs of the agency personnel. And there's a lot happening in this area according to um, the NIST framework, but that's a different presentation. Funding. How do you get funding for your security awareness and training program? You want to determine the extent of funding support to be allocated based on the implementation model that you chose, centralized, decentralized, or hybrid. The agency CIO must send a clear message about expectations for compliance in this area. Funding must be based on existing or anticipated budget and/or agency priorities. The security awareness and training plan has to be viewed as a set of minimum requirements to be met, and those requirements have to be supportable from a budget or a contractual perspective. And the contractual training requirements should be specified in binding documentation, for example, a contract or an MOU. Approaches to express the funding requirements could be as a percent of your overall training budget. Allocations per user. For example, training for key security personnel and your sysadmins will be more costly than general security training for your end users. You could express your funding requirements as a percentage of the overall IT budget, or you can indicate explicit dollar allocations by component based on the overall implementation cost. How do you address funding problems? Problems in implementing security awareness and training plans occur when the training initiatives are deemed to be lower in priority than other agency initiatives. And I will go ahead and tell you that that will happen a lot. It's the responsibility of the CIO to assess competing priorities and to develop a strategy that addresses any shortfalls in funding that are going to impact the agency's ability to comply with security training requirements. You want to adjust the strategy to be more in line with the available budget. You can lobby for additional funding, or you direct a reallocation of current resources. You want to phase the implementation plan in over a predefined period of time as funding becomes available. And so that is how you design an awareness and training program. And in this section, we covered how to structure an awareness and training program, how to conduct a needs assessment, how to develop an awareness and training strategy and plan, how to establish priorities, how to set the bar as to level of complexity, and how to achieve funding for your security awareness and training program. In the next video, we will talk about developing awareness and training material. I thank you so much for joining me and for listening to this particular segment, part 2, designing an IT security awareness and training program. I appreciate your time and I look forward to seeing you on the next video. Thanks and have a great day. Please like and subscribe and leave any comments. I do look at the comments and I will respond.